all these big box PC games. Which one do I review next? None of them. Over the past 5 to 10 years, single-player games have gone in one very specific direction, I've noticed, and that is the gigantic open world with countless activities to keep you occupied. The more tightly written, narrow, shorter single-player experiences have kind of gone by the wayside in favor of these gigantic 50 to 100 hour experiences. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when Ninja Theory came out a couple months ago to announce their new game and announced that it was going to be a shorter AAA focused single player experience but at a $40 price tag, it reminded me that Ninja Theory is kind of a master at its craft. When I think of story-driven single-player games, there's two companies that particularly come to mind, Ninja Theory and Naughty Dog. And Ninja Theory is one of those companies that always produced really good games that never sold well. You look at Heavenly Sword, which was particularly short, and then you have obviously DMC Devil May Cry, which the purist Devil May Cry fans hated for the way they interpreted Dante. But one game that I remember playing and never finishing was Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. And I remember loving it, so when the new game was announced, I had to go back and finish Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. It just came to the forefront of my mind, and I decided, you know what? What better time than now to check out Enslaved? So, let's check out Enslaved: Odyssey to the West. Every once in a while in the gaming world, something will pop up that will remind me of a game that I played in my past, but for one reason or another, never got around to finishing it. I'll remember liking it, sometimes even loving it, but for whatever reason, I put it down and never picked it up again. And I know I'm not the only one this happens to. Hell, my Steam library may as well be a graveyard for games I've started and never finished, regardless of how much I loved them. However, recently, Ninja Theory announced their new game coming out. What was the name of the game again? Hang on. Ninja Theory, new game. Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. And it reminded me of one of my favorite games that I never finished, Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, a sci-fi adaptation of the Chinese fable Journey to the West. And I'll be honest, most of my understanding of that fable comes from the most reliable source. Dragon Ball Z! What I did remember from Enslaved when I played it last was that it was very pretty, the voice acting was great, Andy Serkis, story was fun, and I just don't know why I put it down. Actually, looking back at my description, that kind of describes most Ninja Theory games. For some reason, Ninja Theory seems to be a studio that are kings of creating generally fantastic games that are highly rated and people mostly ignore for bizarre reasons. DMC Devil May Cry was their handiwork, and I guess people just really didn't like edgelord Dante, despite the gameplay being pretty dang good. Heavenly Sword was just, short. Really short. Anyway, I was extremely ready to play through this game, in full this time. The game opens up pretty spectacularly too. You play a man who is merely called Monkey, captured by some unknown group of people to be enslaved. Heyo, title of the game right there. For unknown purposes. And right out the gate, you can tell this is a Ninja Theory game, at least visually. Next to Naughty Dog, Ninja Theory always comes to mind when I think of great looking visuals and amazing facial animations. Even almost 8 years later, the way they could convey subtle emotions through the entire game via visual and facial expression remains awesome. And they make sure you see it too. There are so many close-up shots in this game. Eventually, while sitting in your slave pod, a redheaded girl runs by, messes with a terminal, and stuff starts to explode, allowing our hero Monkey to escape. At this point, he starts chasing after this girl in hopes of her helping him get off the ship completely, as there are only a few escape pods left, and whatever she did is sending this ship careening toward Earth. Robots boot up, and you're forced to fight them to get to her. You'll be climbing and jumping and fighting, and yeah, alright, while I realize this is the game's way of tutorializing the controls, I'm more convinced this is a metaphor for my high school love life trying to go after the girl. Just one failure after another, and I mean, alright, you want a fun story. 7th grade Mathas, which was probably around the age of 13 or so, was at a dance, and the girl he liked a lot was there, and he got her to slow dance with Mathas. That's right, Mathas. Why am I'm talking to myself in the third person for some reason. So I slow dance with this girl as one of the final dances of the night, and at the end of the night, after that dance, I want to show her how grateful I am for taking the time to dance with me, even though she clearly has no interest with me. So what does smooth Mathas do? He pulls out a crumpled $1 bill out of his pocket that Mom gave him to buy some snacks at the dance and gives it to her. But Mathas is smooth. He doesn't tell her he's giving her the dollar because he danced with her. He tells her he just found the dollar and thought that she would enjoy having it. And then Mathas walks away really awkwardly, shaking with sweaty palms. And I crap you not, that is a true story. Eventually, we catch up with the redheaded girl after some less than scientifically accurate platforming, and of course she locks him out of the last escape pod. So he clings on for dear life and gets launched into the ground below, surviving somehow and not breaking any bones whatsoever, and waking up with a headache and a newfound headpiece. That's right, the girl we were chasing, named Trip, sits nearby waiting for us to wake up so she can tell us that she slapped a slave headband onto our pretty Andy Serkis's face. She lets him know that she has effectively enslaved him, and that if he doesn't do as she says, the headband will cause an incredible amount of pain. And moreover, if she dies, Monkey will also die in turn. He's to help her get back to her home where she was taken by the slavers, and once they're there, she'll free him. And she gives Monkey a cute as heck look, so gosh dang it, he's gonna help her. Well, that and he really just doesn't have any choice at all now, does he? The rest of the game, and thus the story, revolves around this now tied together unlikely pair. One enslaving another after both escaped a slaver's ship. Their struggle, chemistry, and relationship is at the forefront of the game for the next few hours, and Ninja Theory really needed to make this work if the game was going to be any good. It could easily have come off as forced or cheesy or just plain old unbelievable. But if there's one thing Ninja Theory has proven to be the master of over the years, it's been characters and storytelling. Monkey and Trip are incredibly believable throughout this entire game. Their unlikely pairing, the stress of being made a slave tied to the livelihood of your enslaver, the relationship forced between the two, and everything in between had me hooked from the very start. What took me even more off guard was how this personal story was put into a backdrop of a destroyed but gorgeous and colorful post-apocalyptic world. Nowadays, post-apocalyptic worlds are brown and gray and disgusting looking, but in Enslaved, it's bright and gorgeous with bright blues and greens and all kinds of different colors, making it a wonder to behold. What little we can gather from dialogue and world cues is that humanity lost a war to mechs and AI like you typically do in video games. Humanity is scattered, living as scavengers, while old cities are being reclaimed by nature. And wild mechs, some looking like wild animals, roam looking to kill anything in its path. How the war started, what caused it is unknown, and for the most part, it's actually ignored by the story. It reminded me a bit of Horizon Zero Dawn, at least the world did. But instead of the world and what happened to it being the main hook, it's merely the world these characters whose personal story is being told inhabit and live in. And I absolutely love it when that is done right, and it is perfectly done here. The world allows for some genuinely creepy moments to shine through as well. Like when you're going through an old mech grave and some of the heads and eyes of the mechs are still working and they dart around following your every move. I really want to tread carefully when talking about the story, however, as the game isn't too long. It only took me about 6 hours to beat. I guess my one complaint about the story is the ending is a bit too abrupt and seems to try to be rushing things to a close. But it's still pretty dang satisfying one way or another. So then, how does the game play? Well, stranger, I'm glad you asked. The game is essentially broken into two parts, platforming and combat. The combat is relatively straightforward with your standard heavy and light attacks you can find in any action game. The more you play, the more abilities you'll be able to unlock that'll add a bit of depth to the combat, but overall, you can just stick to the basic attacks and get by just fine. It's relatively simple, but remains fun and serves to break up the platforming bits throughout the game. My favorite part of the combat has to be when you've killed the last mech in a combat sequence and it zooms in on Monkey in slow-mo as the mech just falls apart when he destroys it. I don't know, man, it's just super satisfying every single time without fail. And you can feel the impact and the weight of the swing. The biggest issue lies with the camera mostly. It tends to fight you a little bit, but more than that, it stays pretty damn zoomed in, and when you're fighting more than 2 mechs, you can easily lose track of where the others are, which gives them a chance to surprise you with easy hits. If it had just zoomed out a bit more for combat sequences, it would have done the game some good. Platforming is also just as straightforward. This gorgeous world is nowhere near open. The entire game is actually pretty narrow and straightforward. Platforming holds no inherent risks of dying by miscalculating a jump, as everything you can jump to is highlighted and guiding you down a specific path. There are little areas here and there that you can go off and check out, but more often than not, it's not terribly significant nor really worth your time trying to figure out how to get to those places. However, what platforming lacks in depth, it makes up for in spectacle. Each area you're leaping around is beautiful and tells a story, like I said before, and the camera swings around in gorgeous shots to show you exactly where you are and what's in the distance. More than once, I stopped just to stare off into the distance and see what the game was trying to show me. Monkey moves just as awesomely as the rest of the game is animated. His animations are utterly fantastic and moves just as his name implies. While you may be doing minimal work in the platforming, the animation, noises, scenery, and more make it wholly enjoyable the entire time. The game truly takes a less is more approach when it comes to gameplay mechanics. And to break up the monotony of the platforming, the game does throw in a few set pieces and chase scenes that can put your quick reflexes to the test and keep your adrenaline pumping. So alright, sure, the game doesn't do anything new or exciting even for 2010 standards, and it's a bit on the narrow and simple side, but I don't think Enslaved was trying to be anything else. It is absolutely meant to be a straightforward, tight, cohesive story with also tight and simple combat mechanics that are fun and satisfying. And I also realized that word continues to come up as I make this video, satisfying. I think that's because it fits the game pretty dang well. Everything you do with a few hiccups is satisfying, and it's all tied together in a beautiful world with a story that is excellently told and fantastically acted. Andy Serkis yet again nails his role. And it doesn't overstay its welcome either. The 6-hour runtime on the game suits it and leaves it open for more if Ninja Theory ever wants to revisit it. Characters have satisfying conclusions, but leave some things up for debate and wonder. The world itself clearly has countless stories to tell, and the game is just perfectly Ninja Theory. It's what these developers do best. Enslaved Odyssey to the West was undeservedly ignored for basically every reason that I listed in the video. The gameplay is tight and solid, the voice acting is incredible, the game looks gorgeous, it's well acted. There's just a lot to love about Enslaved Odyssey to the West. And if you've got a spare 5 to 6 hours over the course of a week, throw in an hour to the game every day, it's well worth just running through it. You can get it really cheap now on both consoles and on PC, so I can't recommend this experience enough as long as you understand you're not getting the open world that you may be used to nowadays, and instead getting something that is meant to be telling a story and to guide you from point A to point B while giving you some remarkable visuals and some really fun gameplay in between. And that's why I, the Honorable Judge Mathas, judge this game as guilty. Guilty of being ignored for no real good reason. Even the reviews I went to go check up on to see if the game was panned in any way were actually really good, with one of the lower scores being like 7 to 7.5, where most games gave it an 8 or higher. It is short, it is an open world where all the new hotness was maybe for 2010, but it's one of those games that deserves attention. So if you ever get a chance to spend $5 or $10 or whatever it ends up being, grab it, spend a week playing an hour a day, and enjoy the story of Trip and Monkey. It is one that you won't forget, and I hope maybe one day Ninja Theory will revisit this world, because it's interesting and there's a lot of story to tell here. So my question to you guys is simple. What is a game that you loved and it seems that critics loved, but the consumers ignored for one reason or another? Ninja Theory is a hotbed for that type of game, and let's hope that Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice changes things up for the developer in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Judge Mathas, and special thank you to all of my patrons over on patreon.com. If you want to check out what that's all about, link in the description below. I should be back in a couple of weeks with a brand new video for you guys. I appreciate everything you do for me. I love you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.